I don't really love financing things. So the only three things in my life I actually owe money on are my car, my phone, and my girlfriend. But that just left me wondering, why the hell are we going into debt for freaking phones? I mean, what's so special about new phones to the point where I'm giving money to some banker in a suit that costs more money than my car for no reason? Is it because I'm poor, or are just the kids wrong? So I spent $99 on this, a Google Pixel 4a, a fully functional smartphone that is only actually a few years old. And it was an even bigger waste of money than financing a damn phone. Buying a new phone is pretty simple. It's similar to buying a new car. You take your pants off, walk into the local carrier store, who you already gave your arm to, and prepare yourself for the worst. Buying a used phone is a little different because you can't just buy whatever phone you fancy and sometimes have to look for deals. You also have to look out for carrier locks or Apple's Black Magic locks and iCloud accounts. But since it's an Android, we mainly need to either snag a phone with the same carrier you use or just an unlocked phone you use for, well, anything. Also look out for poor condition phones with scratches and any other business locks that may be on the phone. Just normal stuff when buying used tech. I looked at a couple different phone brands for my $100 smartphone, but at the end of the day, I had to go with a Google Pixel for reasons I'll discuss in a little bit. I went ahead and just got a decent black 4A in good condition from a decent seller that was unlocked, and it seemed to be the best phone for my budget. It arrived in just a little padded envelope though with some bubble wrap, but hey, got here without issues. That's fine. It was actually in really, really good condition with no scratches on the screen and looks pretty much brand new with some small marks in the back. It was all in working condition and powered on easily without problems, and basic apps worked. But I got a Pixel for a very specific reason. Before I get into, I guess it's a good time to mention a major bias of mine. I have always used Samsung phones since basically my second smartphone. I've tried iPhones. I've tried, I don't know, LG. I hated that phone. Either way, the only time I've ever really used anything else long term is a previous job of mine that provided a Pixel 3a for work calls I would never pick up and emails I didn't respond to, along with Excel sheets I never wanted to fill out, but I did during my lunch break, so I got paid lunch breaks. Hey! But it was the worst phone I have ever used in my entire life. I am not kidding. All that to say, I was hesitant to buy a Pixel, but I figured I'd give it another shot for one big reason. Graphene OS, a more privacy-focused version of Android, which right now is desperately needed in the world we live in. And the 4A happens to be the cheapest phone that it supports. I won't go through the whole spiel now, but if you do want a full video on this, let me know in the comments as it's actually pretty interesting. Installing was simple. Just go through their setup guide with a laptop or desktop hooked up to your phone, and you're pretty much done. The first thing I noticed is how small the 4A is. I normally am not the biggest fan of cases, but the first thing I did was get a case since my hands are just way too freaking big for this thing. And also a screen protector because I like to take care of my stuff. But it finally fits in the cup holder of my car in case I need to use, I don't know, maps or something like that. I don't know. My Galaxy A52, my previous daily driver, would not fit in my freaking car. Why, Toyota, are your cup holders so damn small? The phone has a pretty basic black plastic back with volume buttons, and a headphone jack. Sweet. And a weirdly white power button. Does not have a micro SD card slot though, like my Galaxy A52 had, so I can't move all my photos, TV shows, and movies over as easily. Today's phones really are in a sad state. It also has a 5.8-inch 1080p 60Hz AMOLED display without any actual noticeable burn-in. And along with that has an 8-core Snapdragon 730G, that means nothing to me, but it's there, 128GB of internal storage, 60GB of RAM, nice, and a 12.12 megapixel f1.7 main camera, and an 8-megapixel selfie camera, along with a fingerprint scanner and 3100 milliamp hour battery, along with a $199 MSRP. Ooh, that is spicy. The display is actually pretty good. I would prefer to have a 90 or 120 Hz 1440 display, but it's still really solid. My A52 has a 120 Hz display, which for scrolling, it is really, really nice. But it sure does kill your battery life. It's also not very water resistant, having only an IP52 rating, so no more watching your favorite YouTubers in the shower. Maybe consider going on a date or two. Just don't be weird. And one big problem I had with my Pixel 3a is the fingerprint scanner never worked. But thankfully, the fingerprint scanner on my 4a does work, but it is extremely finicky. I had to add my pointer finger 3 times for it to recognize it maybe 75% of the time, 50% of days, every time. My A52 with the in-screen fingerprint scanner has never had this issue. But I mean, it's not the biggest problem. Maybe sometimes we just need to appreciate what we have. What is a big deal though, is how well this still works with modern apps and the condition of the battery. My battery lasts me easily all day. And on lighter days, it lasts 2 full days. Normally by the end of the second day, I'm sitting around 10 to 15% or something like that at the end of the day. But I mean, 2 days. I don't think I've ever had that happen with a smartphone before. Well, I do keep my apps pretty minimal personally. Notepad, a to-do list, password manager, YouTube, music, YouTube Studio, retail therapy, and a couple other important apps I need. None of them really feel like they're running on a budget phone nearing 3 years old, and they're all fully supported and updated since the 4A supports Android 13 and is still getting updates from Google. There was also no pre-installed bloat garbage like Samsung and most other Android phones have, even with the standard Android that the Pixel 4a came with. And none of that stupid T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T garbage that comes installed. Seriously. I think that did help a lot with the performance either way, and battery life, not having all that garbage on there. YouTube could easily play back at 1080p, even with picture-in-picture with another app in the foreground, and it had just no issues at all. Basic features like calls and messaging obviously worked fine without issues, although I did notice it's a little finicky where I put the phone on my ear for me to be able to hear people, but it's not that big of a deal. And a big thing, Bluetooth worked really well and connected both to my car and Galaxy Buds without issues. I did have issues though with my banking apps. It's actually a pretty common issue. Not a single one of them worked for me at first, which at least for me is a complete deal breaker. I kind of need to know my money. The reason they were broken though is something I don't really know much about, but you can read about it more on Graphene OS's FAQ. It doesn't really apply to this phone specifically, but to fix it, all I had to do was change one setting and I could use all my banking apps like normal. And so far, barring the fingerprint scanner issues, this phone has literally done everything I could ever possibly have asked of it. And for just about a month, it has done this. I mean, I would say this phone is completely usable without a single doubt, and more than enough for 99% of people. Honestly, besides the smaller screen and 60 hertz, I really haven't noticed the difference between this and my A52 on the fingerprint scanner, but whatever. Maybe if you're a gamer, it wouldn't be ideal, but hey, don't you all have computers at home? Honestly, this is sad. Not that this phone works so well, but that I'm surprised it still works after only 3 years. I mean, frankly, a 3-year-old phone isn't that different from a modern one, but for some reason a lot of people scoff at it and insist on getting the new iPhone 32 8-camera AI enhanced edition for $26.99. I guess while we're on the subject of this being 3 years old and batteries repairability, stuff breaks. That's life. I actually used to dabble repairing phones of people that I mostly knew back in the iPhone 6s days. So batteries, screens, maybe a couple cameras. I mean, it wasn't easy, but it wasn't that hard. It was mostly screws, if I remember correctly. That said, since I'm most likely going to be giving this phone away after I'm done with it, and the battery is in good shape, I'm not going to take it apart. But iFixit does provide a nice guide on how you would. By the way, if you want one of my iFixit toolkits, I have Amazon affiliate links in the description. And to just replace a simple battery on a phone that isn't very water resistant, you need to pull the screen away from the frame of the phone with a suction cup while prying at it with the plastic spudger thing. I mean, look at how many steps are involved just to replace a freaking battery in a phone. And you need new adhesive strips to put the screen back on. I mean, how is this necessary, Google? This is a budget phone and it's not even that thin. Like, it's thin, but it's not that thin. Why do I need to go from the top to the bottom to change the battery? So, even if I don't have the money to buy an expensive phone and get expensive phone repairs, this is a cheap phone. You get a cheap phone to use it as a phone and use it for a while, honestly. And you probably don't want to pay for some expensive phone repair that's going to mechanically total your phone. It's a really stupid way of putting that, but it's true. It's basically what it is. I wouldn't even mind the adhesive if I could just go in through the back and take the freaking battery out. But why do I have to remove the entire front of the phone and its guts just to replace a simple $40 part that, I'd consider it a maintenance item? I know that's where most phones are heading, but I will bitch and moan about things like this no matter how many millimeters thicker it makes the phone, or however better the phone may look with only having one seam on the side instead of two. I know most people don't care anymore, but I like using my stuff until I cannot possibly use it anymore. And if software isn't forcing us to buy new stuff we don't need, then it's things like this taking basic maintenance out of the hands of regular people who don't already know how to work on small electronics. Okay, rant over. But on the bright side, it doesn't look like the screen itself is too difficult to repair, since it's a 1080p 60Hz flat display. It's actually pretty cost effective to do it if you break the screen, as long as you can find it in stock somewhere. So I guess points for that, Google. This also wouldn't be a phone review without bringing up the camera. The camera on my Pixel 3a actually wasn't too horrible, so my expectations weren't that low. The 4A camera is pretty solid. It supports 4K video too, which is nice, but Graphene doesn't have the best photo and video settings or app. You can choose to strip all the EXIF data from your photos and video, which is a really nice touch. 4K video doesn't look great in low light. Obviously, this is a comparison between the 4A and my Fuji X-T3. Not a big fan of the low light, but when you have enough light, the video looks alright, not too bad. Certainly not a proper mirrorless with a lens, but for a cheap phone, it looks decent. It's pretty usable too. The screen is pretty responsive and there's not a ton of delay when recording. The photos also look really solid. The photo app isn't that responsive, but I didn't really notice a major photo quality change from my A52 personally. The photo app is just really bad. But if you're like me and take a camera everywhere anyways, it's not that big of a deal. Now, if you don't have a $2,000 camera setup to take everywhere, like some sort of, I don't know, sane person, a third-party camera app would be smart so you don't miss any important photos. I can guarantee you this though. In August of 2023, that's just a few months away at the time of writing this phone will not be worth $100 or even $10 for that matter. If someone gave me $100 to use this phone in 2024, I wouldn't accept $100. And I like using my products as long as I possibly can and not upgrading unless I have to, because it's just a complete waste in every way. I mean, the only reason I switched from my Galaxy S10 to the A52 is because my S10 screen broke. I was leaning up on a wall waiting for almost a dozen people to figure out how to drop the top on a C8 Corvette a little while after they came out. So why would a cheap ass like me not suffer through using this phone in 2024? Because Google, as most phone companies that make Android phones, stopped supporting their phones on their software a few years after release. For the 4A, it's 3 years. And after 3 years, Google will no longer provide OS or security updates at all. For someone like Samsung, I can maybe understand because they don't make Android itself. Maybe there's some additional challenges. But Google makes Android. Why can't they support their freaking phone for more than 3 years? This is a very ranty episode. So while I do think this is an amazing phone at an amazing price, having it shipped across the country just so you can throw it out in a few months to save $1 now is pretty stupid. Just suck it up and spend the extra money to get something a little bit newer like a Pixel 6 that'll last you longer. And honestly, I think I might, for the first time ever in my life, buy a new phone before I actually need it and get a Pixel 6 or even 7. Which you can get below with my affiliate links, by the way. Since Google claims the 7 will have 5 years of security updates, I mean, it doesn't look like a bad deal. I think I might finally like the Pixel phones, and maybe it's time to jump off Samsung's sinking ship and move on to the sinking Google ship. Maybe it just hasn't sunk quite as much yet. Or maybe, just maybe, I need to finally give Apple a go and see how they treat their users long term.